Beyond recovery, live your best life, free from addiction. Join alcohol-free host Matt Gardner and his weekly guests to talk about their hero's journey from the darkness of addiction into the light of recovery. Matt also interviews healers, coaches, speakers, and authors to help provide a broad spectrum of topics and resources. Beyond recovery means feeling into and through your past traumas to create a life you don't want to numb out or escape from. Beyond recovery means accepting your limitations and deciding still to live a life full of abundance. Living beyond recovery is to rediscover who you truly are. Let's start the show. I just recorded that intro, Roger. My first show with the intro. What do you think of it? Is it a little too wordy? Is it too long? Does it ramble on?
Sounds fine to me.
Oh,
No.
brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us. Roger Davies, author, amongst many other things, two-time Guinness Book World Record holder. Man, there's so many accolades I could bestow upon you. Let's do it sort of intermittently throughout the show as we unpack your story. Thanks for coming on the show today. How are you today?
I'm good.
Excellent.
Talking about the two world records, I remember going into my lounge not long ago and looking at the two world records up on the wall and think, how did that happen? How did it happen? When I was a kid at school, I was a dyslexic before they invented dyslexia. So you thought you were dumb, lazy, stupid. So in those days they pretty cruel people.
Yeah.
And schooling wasn't a pleasant place to be back then. So I didn't have a good schooling. So when I left school at the age of 17, I was quiet, I was distant to other people, but I found drink. And at 17, I went into a bar, and for the first time I had a proper drink. And it did something, it clicked, and I liked it. Unfortunately, the violence that was beset on me came out of me when I drank. I became a very violent man. And it was out of character, but that's as it was. By the time I was 18, I'd been nicked by the police for grievous bodily harm. My dad decided that it was the people I was knocking around with that was leading me astray. So he sent me off into the Merchant Navy. I wasn't in there 12 months before they threw me out. I was arrested again, and I was in a Glasgow prison, Bellini, for again, violent crimes. Not good. And it didn't get any better. People wouldn't employ me. I was no good at parties. So by the time I was 19, I was on the door in clubs, working the doors. And when you work the doors, you get involved with a lot of people who are serious criminals. You start dealing drugs. You start collecting money from them, legally and otherwise. And it didn't get any better. I earned a living from violence for a number of years. And it wasn't good. It wasn't good. But one day I was 33 years of age. And for some reason, I don't know why, I saw myself for what I was. I was a drunk. I was a pain in the ass. I wasn't someone you could trust. I'd become unreliable, even with the villains. I was becoming unreliable. So I went to a doctor and he said, oh, well, I think you better go to this 12-step program. So I made a phone call. In those days, there was just pre-mobile phones. So you had to go to a proper phone box or to your home phone and make this call. And then some guy picked up the phone and was talking to me, and he said, did I want to go to a meeting? I didn't know what he was talking about, really. And I had that moment in life with all that past baggage that I'd got. And the past baggage included like going on the run. I was on the run in France. And I took myself with me, and down there I was violent down there, and I went on the run from the police down there, and there were guns and dogs and all sorts of things messing around south of France. But at this moment in time, when I remember some of these things that had happened, I thought maybe it is drink. Maybe there's a link between the way I'm living, the problems I've got with the villains, with the police, with everybody else. Maybe it's not just other people, maybe something with me. So when I spoke to this guy, I started to explain what I looked like. 6'2", 17 stone, dark hair. And he said, no, I recognize you. And of course, I thought he knew me. I'm infamous, I'm known, I'm a face. He didn't think that. He knew what he was going to see. somebody that was just coming off the bevy, coming off the piss. Not a good sight to see. But I collapsed soon after the meeting, and I had to be taken into a general hospital. And the general hospital, they said, I told them what had happened. I'd been drinking and I tried to stop by myself without any help. And they said, well, do I want to go to a treatment? I didn't care. At that moment, I didn't care. I wanted to leave the past alone and walk away. So they put me, and it didn't go into what they call the Priory or Promise or Clouds or anything like that. It was St Bernard's Mental Hospital. That wasn't my plan in life. So they took me over into this lockup ward where they were treating alcoholics. And I think it was drug addicts there, but mostly alcoholics. And I listened, and I gave me an opportunity to be a buffer away from the people I was looking around with, away from the bars, couldn't get a drink. They gave me a job in there, and this is in the nut house. This is really a ward in the nut house. And they gave me a job as looking after the dry stores. That was all the tea, the sugar, the coffee, the cakes, the sweeties, the biscuits, all that sort of stuff. So my first job was nicking all that so I could pay for cigarettes. You know, this is gangster now stealing petty things for cigarettes. But when I came out of there, and I left there, I came out, I went to one of those meetings again, and I started to go. And it was very difficult. I didn't really understand what was going on, but no one challenged me. No one did anything. But the problem I had is that I was still the same person. I wasn't changing. I was just not drinking. And I didn't know that wasn't enough. And I was going back and forwards to these meetings. I said, well, I've got the money. I still got to get hold of my hands on the money that I used to get hold of. So he said, well, why don't you get a job? Well, I'd never thought of that. Because my world was being different. I didn't. So I did get a job. Started working on a building site. I thought this is quite a good thing, but it wasn't long before I decided that I've got no trade. I'll employ other people to do work. And that's what I did when I was at it. So I did. About 2 years away from a drink. I was still fist fighting on building sites, I have to say. I was aggressive. I was grumpy. I beat up the secretary of the meeting in front of other people. This is not something people wanted to see. They turned their back. They were ashamed. I was ashamed of myself for the first time ever. I thought they were going to agree with me. They weren't going to agree with me. And I thought, there's something not right here. And I remember leaving, and I walked sat at a cafe next to a tube station where I lived. And I was just sitting there by myself and thinking, what am I going to do? Am I going to go back to the old ways? Or am I going to do something about getting on with my life properly? Or maybe I ought to change. Maybe I had to do a few things, you know. Instead of arguing, keep my mouth shut. Instead of fighting, sit on my hands. No, go and get healthy. Do something about it. You know, stay away from, not just stay away from the first drink, the first drug. I thought, no, I give up smoking, get healthy. And I thought, got a good idea. It's probably meat that's doing it. So maybe if I become a vegetarian, I don't eat meat, maybe that might help me. Really clever thinking, you know.
Yeah.
So I didn't drink. And I stayed sober. I went to meetings. And I started to get a little bit better. Just gradually, I got better. I went to lots of meetings. I ran a building business. I created all sorts of stuff. And about 8 or 9 years sober, I met a lady, very nice lady. She was works in the City of London. And we got married. I bought a house. We bought a house. A nice, large house, 3 bedrooms, respectable area. Even got electric gates on the front. I'm not sure if it was to keep me in or keep people out. I'm not sure. But I've got electric gate. I had nice cars and things. And we had a daughter. So now I got responsibility. I'm Mr. Respectable. Before I got the daughter, I have to say that it wasn't working. I plenty practice, but my wife wasn't falling pregnant, so I bought her a horse. That didn't work because 6 weeks later she was pregnant and she couldn't ride the horse anymore. So that was a bit of a waste of money. But it was great having my daughter, going to work, putting a home together, putting a life together. Things were changing. Things were getting better. Things were beyond dreams that I had. I had dreams. I'd made plenty of money when I was drinking. but it was all illegal. I knew how to do a deal. I knew how to. If a dealer came into a club where I was working the doors, we'd rob him and take his gear and sell it or use it. It was pretty insane, those worlds. But in this sobriety, I knew I'd have to do different things, and there was different levels of it. I was, what was I? About, I don't know, 12, 14 years sober. And I was sitting in a restaurant on a Saturday morning with my daughter, who was probably 4 or 5 years old, and my wife. And there was a guy behind who was with his wife. This is an Italian restaurant full of families, full of kids. And this guy's kicking off and swearing. So I thought, I'd have a word with him, so to keep it down. But I went over, spoke to him to ask him to cut swearing out, do us a favor. We got kids in here, got wives in here. He was all right for a moment, and then you could hear him. You had another beer. He started to get a bit louder, and he came over. And before I thought about it, the old me came back, and dink, I knocked him, chinned him. I thought, that's, Roger, that's not the thing to do. It sounds like you're protecting your family, but it says I have to do more changing. And I was in that changing, I was doing stuff. I remember on one occasion, I thought one of the things I did when I got sober is get fit. And I was sitting watching the television one Saturday morning, and I watched the London Marathon. I thought, I could do that. Yeah, just like you do. Yeah, can you? Yeah. So I went out, I bought a pair of training shoes, and I lived in a rough area at first. This is before I got married. I really lived in a rough area, so I put under what they call nowadays a hoodie. So you couldn't see me. Well, you couldn't. You've got to remember, this is a 17-stone lump that's running around the streets in a roughish area. And most people are doing the running there are running to something, from something. But I was supposed to be jogging. So by the time I was married with my daughter, I was well into running. I'd run marathons. I'd run the tough guy a few times. I'd done all that sort of stuff. And my wife, who works in the city, came home one day and said, one of our friends in the city had gone to the North Pole. I said, well, yes, I can do that. Get me his number. So she did. She got me this guy's number called Jock Wishart. And I phoned him up. And funny enough, he didn't live 5 miles away from me, all the places. And I phoned him up, this Jock, I hear you're looking for a good man to go to the North Pole. And he just laughed. So the two of us got in a conversation, and he said, at the end of this conversation, he said, right, £1,000 non-refundable deposit. I took £1,000 round to his house in an envelope the next morning. And I started training properly. And I had no concept of what it was going to be like in those frozen conditions. I mean, the only thing, a bit of snow in England, that's as much as I'd experienced. Mm-hmm. So I started training. Unfortunately, I had a heart attack during that training.
Oh, jeez.
I didn't know quite what happened. I was sitting on a rowing machine doing all the rowing. And anyway, I survived that. And they put a stent inside me. I thought it was going to change my life. But actually, after it was put in, I thought, okay. So I went back to training. I didn't tell anybody from who I was going to go with. And so 8 months later, found myself at Resolute Bay with my kit and a bunch of lads and one friend, because I was going to go. And I walked 650k to the North Pole. But before I went, I was put in the sledge. There was only two of us, myself and James Trotman. Before we went, a friend of mine in the fellowship said, hey, why don't you take the big book? You could take it and leave it up there. Well, I never thought this thing out at all. So I got a lot of friends of mine to sign this big book. We got to put it in an orange case so anybody could spot it. Well, I tell you, by the time I got to the North Pole, there was no way I was giving this book away. Yeah. But there's nothing there. It's just on North Pole is on ice. It was the biggest, best trip I've ever done. Wow. It was something absolutely amazing. And to think that I was 28 years sober. A drunk can do that at the age of 61. So if I can do that, maybe there's other things I can do. Maybe there's other people that can get inspirations. You're not too old. And sobriety gives you the opportunities to go and do things. That's the amazing thing. I never dreamt of doing this stuff. So what do I do when I come back? I thought, well, Kilimanjaro sounds pretty good to me. I think I'd seen people on the television do that, and they looked pretty good. So I called a few of my friends who I've been to pole with and a few other people, and I put together a little team. And off we went to Kilimanjaro, went up and down Kili. That was different. I came back down and one of my knees got bad. So by the time I went to the doctor, they had to give me a total knee replacement. But, 18 months later, I went up there again. I climbed Kili the second time just to see it could be done with me, to test my metal knee, to see if it was okay. And this time I took my present wife, actually. She wasn't my wife then, she was just a friend, and things happen in life. But I just continued doing these things. I continued running. I started rowing. I started doing other things. I walked across the Sahara. One of the nicest places to go and experience is like the Atlas Mountains, which is not too far from England. You can do that in a few hours. You do it over a weekend. And it's beautiful. And people live there. And the houses, the animals live downstairs, the people live in the middle floor, and they put us up on the roof to sleep. So you walk to, this is all in sobriety. Then somebody else came up with an idea. Well, why don't you row the Atlantic? Why don't you start rowing? So I started rowing on the Thames. I rowed coastal. And then I had this opportunity to join the team to row the Atlantic. So here was I, 35 years sober, 68 years of age. And I set off from the Canaries to row across the Atlantic. And I spoke to a friend of my, Jock, the guy that I've been to pole with, and he'd done it before. And he said it's the most tedious buoy that you could ever do. And I didn't realize what it meant, but I can tell you, you're rowing for 12 hours a day. You're doing shifts. You do an hour at the middle of the day, the hottest part, or what's supposed to be the hottest part, then a 2 and a 3 and a 4. In the middle of the night, you're doing the 3 and 4. So you get some kind of sleep. It's an incredible experience. But to get in perspective of what's going on, to try and understand how difficult it was, a rogue wave caught us. We were 1,400 miles out in the middle of the Atlantic. We'd seen no ships, no planes, no nothing. You're out in the middle of there. And a big wave took a boy off the boat, washed him off. There's 8 of us on there, 4 rowing at any one time, and he was in front of me. He was washed off. I was battered off my seat. My seat was messed up, meaning that was lifted off its runners and thrown to one side. I'm quite a big bloke to lift up, but we couldn't get him back. I saw that boy's light. We were wearing head torches with a red light. I saw him for an hour and a half before we'd lost sight of him. So we lost him. We were taken, some next day, people came, there was some big boat, big transporter came by, picked us up, took us off. But what that is that not all these things are safe. It's not always wonderful. Experiences are tough. My big experience for that is I've gone from this violent man where I beat up somebody in the fellowship, and then I've been taken onto a safety boat after seeing a good boy die. He was a 21-year-old lad, and he was a nice boy. And he died. And they took us on the boat, and 7 out of the 8 of us drank. But still, I remembered what I was like when I was drinking, and remember the fellowship that had got under my skin and embedded in me. It wasn't worth taking the drink. So the first thing I had was a coffee, a hot shower, clean clothes. But we came back to England and we got back. And since then, I've done lots of other things as well, always in sobriety. I never, ever, ever walked away from the fellowship that helped me out in the beginning, because I knew there was something there. I didn't want to drink. There was more to life than drinking. When I was drinking, I was just someone that you couldn't trust. I mean, I was the kind of guy, I know that I walked into a bar, looked at someone, he's looked back, I've made the decision what he's going to say. And if he says that, I'm going to say this. And I've chinned him. He hasn't even opened his mouth. There's no actual conversation between us. That was the insanity of my drinking. The money that I made was, I bought houses, I bought cars, I bought all sorts of things. But now I'm sober, and I'm quite a long time sober. I've done stuff. So I walked up to Everest, base camp, from Nepal. That was beautiful. Oh, absolutely stunning. That was a beautiful thing to do. And then I got a phone call. Would I like to go to Everest and play rugby? And this is where the world records were. But this time you got via Tibetan side, you got the other side. We went up to 6,500 meters. Wow. And that's pretty tall. We played rugby first at 5,002 at base camp, Tibetan side. And then we went out 6,005, but we came down to 6,331 meters, and we played again with rugby. That I can tell you, I run marathons, but up there, it was like running a marathon, breathing through a straw. You know,
Oof, yeah.
You know, it was hard graft. Not everybody made it, unfortunately, up there. So I think 28 of us went, and only 21 got to that section up there. My wife and myself were part of it, and that's why we got the world records. And it was really, really good. They'd done tests that checked me out as healthy because I'm old. I was 71 when I did that. They checked us out that we're physically fit and we were capable of doing these things. And I queried the tests. I thought there's something not quite right about this, you know. Anyway, when we came back, I started doing stuff. Unfortunately, I got a test and I found I had cancer. I had cancer on Everest, but I didn't know it. And that was a bit of a shock. Wow. Because I kept myself clean and tidy, and the question you ask them straight away is, well, okay, so I've got it. How long have I got? And they said, I will tell you. So they said, no, we're treating you. You're going to give chemo. And I didn't know what chemo was. Chemo is sitting in a chair for 7 hours with a thing in your arm, and they're pumping you through some really dodgy drugs. And they're good for you. They're not the out of you. I lost all my hair, everywhere. Quite embarrassing, you know. Made you feel bad, but it worked. Wow. And the reason they found out I'd got cancer is because I had a hernia, and it was by accident. They checked me out. And they did a scan. That's how they found I got cancer, and they reported it back to when I was on, before I went to Everest. Wow. But they dealt with it. I had the cancer, I had the chemo, I did all the treatments, 16 weeks of treatment, and I'm in remission. And I had the last chemo on the 3rd of February, 21. Wow. On the 3rd of August, I kayaked from England across the Channel to Boulogne. Now, when we arrived in, so I did it properly because I now know about the sea as a dodgy place. So I did it with a safety boat. I did it with 3 friends. Two of them were in a double, and there was my mate and myself in our single. So we were kayaking across. And as we were getting to Boulogne, you no doubt heard about all these refugees that we had coming across the Channel. Well, the big blue boat with guns and lights and God knows what else came whistling up to us. It was a gendarmerie, French gendarmerie, to see what we were up to. Yeah, right. I mean, we were going the wrong way. We were going to France, so we weren't. Yeah. But they were okay. We'd done that. So we did it. And a few weeks later, I went over to Boulogne and kayaked back. So I've done it both ways. This, wow. You know, this is doing stuff. This is taking the sobriety and actually living. Because I've got one life. That's all I've got. And I don't want to waste it. No, things I've done, everybody's got their own mountains to climb, in my view. Now, so I don't ask anybody else to do what I do, but you've got your own mountain. Go climb it. Go for it. Do the best you can. Don't sit there. Life is too short. I know. So I've got plans for next year, but I'm working on them. Unfortunately, with the chemo, it kills the immune system, but the immune system's come back, and it's come back with a vengeance and given me a rather nasty psoriasis. So my hands are bad. But I found that I can wear certain mittens, and I'm on treatments and stuff. So hopefully my hands will stand up to the next adventure.
Yes. Incredible. Wow. It's just an incredible story. And I know you have a book. I'd love to get into, how you came across, writing it, and if you have some help writing it and such. And the book is called Live a Life to Die For. So let's get a little bit into that. I'm sure a lot of these stories are fleshed out in there. First of all, incredible stories. Before we get into the book, I just want to get back to some of the things that you talked about. To paraphrase what you said earlier, you said like sobriety equals opportunity, or sobriety is an opportunity. And, if you hadn't stayed sober for and congratulations, 30 plus years, well over 30 years now.
41 years.
God, even better. Over 40 years. Incredible. So congratulations to you. What do you think would have happened? Like, I know it's tricky to see, but like all of these adventures you've had since then, it's such a fascinating idea of like what would happen if you had continued on that other journey, right? Because you said it was a life of crime. You were doing things. I guess forming a question here. Bear with me, but I guess the question that comes from it: what was guiding you? What do you think was guiding you? Because you said in your head like, "Oh, I have to change this." What voice is that? Where did that come from? Where you're like, "I have to change my ways," right? What prevented you from continuing that life of crime? How would you describe that?
Well, I did see myself for what I was. I mean, I saw people who, for some reason, it's okay when you're being violent amongst your friends, your mates, when you're out there doing the job that you're doing. They were all up for it. It was part of. But when it's people that aren't involved in that sort of thing, and you see the look of disgust on their faces, not just fear. You can put fear into anyone. Villains know how to put fear in. You give them a slap first and then talk afterwards. It's insanity. The guys I was knocking around with were crazy as I was. We were just off the wall. But just for a moment, I saw me. Thought, no, this is not good. And I knew, in a way, that I would never live to 40. The way I was carrying on, there's no way. The drinking would get me. The violence would get me. Accidents would get me. So something would get me. There would be nothing there. And I was getting nowhere. And I started getting worse. You start losing your touch when you get involved in these things. It was just something twitched in your head. And when you realise it is another world, because once you're caught up in that subculture of it's easy to deal, you make money. You make serious money dealing. Collecting money and even working the doors in the old days. This is before they have badges on them, before they're vetted, before there's insurance. They used to hire us. We go around and cause the problems. And they'd use gangsters and villains and faces, or whatever they would call us. Wow. I wouldn't have lasted. And I've noticed when I spoke about the difference on the boat, I didn't take a drink because I knew I didn't want to go back to that. It's that hardwired. I don't want to go back to that world. And I know the same man would drink again. So I had to change. I couldn't continue the way I was going.
Do you think that that moment that you mentioned where you'd hit the rogue wave and the 21-year-old boatmate had passed away and everybody else was drinking except for you, was that your most challenging time that as far as like challenging your sobriety? Like, was that the most like, wow, like you really felt pressure perhaps, or it was very much in your face? Was that the most challenging that you had as far as your sobriety was?
Yeah, it was pretty challenging. Yeah, it was. Yeah. And there was no matter of support. The support was, I knew people back home. I knew that it was there. I'm not a religious man. It was unfortunately the people that beat me were mainly Catholics. So I lost that. I got that knocked out of me many years ago. And I don't, there's some really good guys in every society right across. There's good and there's bad in lots. So I'm not pointing the finger at anything.
Sure. Yeah, no,
But
that makes, oh, go ahead.
it's often small things that can sneak under the wire that I've got to watch. I can get complacent. I remember talking to somebody one time and saying, maybe I'm not an alky. Maybe I'm just one of those people with grave emotional mental disorders. I'm a bit nuts. And he said, have you heard your own story? He reminded me of the stories that what I did when I was at it.
Yeah.
And I thought, because I'd go into a pub, there was no off switch.
Right.
I had no off switch. And I had a high tolerance. That started to leave a bit. But I was big, I was fit, I was strong, I was healthy. So, I could take an awful lot down me. That's no good. And I drank out. I didn't hide away. I was in your face.
Yeah. Yeah, I got you. How important were those, was that meeting? You talk about the fellowship and getting into the meetings. Like how long did that take for you to be in those meetings before it really started to, because you mentioned you're not necessarily a religious person or, put your words in your mouth, spiritual person per se. What was it about the rooms? Was it the fellowship? Was it the people? So that was your support in a sense, right? It was like, yeah. Well, how long did it take for you to keep going to those meetings, and why did you keep going back?
I saw what happened to people who didn't go back. I remember if I keep on doing something, it's if I'm training for a marathon, and I decide of a week or a month off, and I think I'm going to run a marathon too, but that's not going to work. You're not going to get to the end of that race.
Right.
I ran some good times, so if I want to stay sober, I've got to keep it up. It's a daily process.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just and that's what great thing. If you keep it in the day, when I was crossing the Atlantic, it was keeping it in that shift. When I was walking to the North Pole, I've gone walking for 8 hours a day. You're doing it just for that moment. You just keep on going. You just keep on going. It's not a race when you're doing that. It's not a race climbing a mountain. It's a gentle process. When you're walking in Africa, they're called poli poli. Poli poli, poli poli. It's slowly. And at the pole, it's the polar plod. You just do everything, and that's how I treat life. I learned from the fellowship. If I just do this and keep this in the day, and if I could draw it back in the moment, and it really gets tough. I phone someone up, say I'm having a shit time. I got wiped out with money because I didn't understand how the legal system works, and I got screwed for £500,000 and I was 10, 11, 12 years sober, somewhere in there. So all that money I'd worked for in those early years got wiped out because I didn't know the rules. I knew how to collect money, but I knew I couldn't go and do that again.
Yeah.
I had to do it through the law, and I didn't know the system. And the judge apologized to me. The other man's solicitor came up. I won't knock his head off, but I didn't. And I realized that there's nothing I can do. The law is the law, and they pulled a stroke, and I didn't know how to work it.
Wow.
But I got through that. Today, I've got a lovely home. It looks direct behind me because this is my daughter's. She's just put stuff in here.
Yeah.
But life is, I've got a nice house. I've got a great wife. I've got 5 kids, 7 grandkids. I've got a dog. And I used to have, when I got sober, but when I was drinking, I had Dobermans. When I got sober, I got Ridgebacks. Now I've got a Labradoodle.
Yes.
And I take my Labradoodle for a 5 or 6K walk over the fire hills every day.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool.
I do one of those, I get up and do a Wim Hof shower.
Oh, okay. The cold showers.
The cold shower.
Yes.
Do the cold shower. that's a good thing because it tells me it's good for my immune system. I need all the help I can get. And it's all
Right.
it is 5 minutes in a cold shower and it helps my immune system. I can put
Yeah.
up with it.
Sure.
And that is like a mental thing.
Yeah.
It's like it keeps you mentally strong.
Yeah.
And it's important. These things are important.
Perfectly segue into talking about mentally strong. Like when I was picturing you doing those overnights, like you're rowing for 12 hours at a time, including overnights, how affected that could be on your mental state. How do you stay in a good way? Like what kind of things are going through your head when you're committed to just rowing for 12 straight hours, trying to get some sleep? Man, I can imagine that the mind chatter would be endless at times, would it not be?
Yes, it is sometimes, yeah. It's very tedious. It is, I'm
Right.
afraid, very tedious. There's nothing there to look at. If you see a fly fish, you think that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw a whale. That was the biggest thing we ever saw. It's wonderful, wonderful. All I can see is the guy's back in front of me.
Right.
And my head is all over the place. I'm looking for anything to entertain myself.
Right.
But
Yeah.
there is no drink on there. There's nothing else I could do. I can't go out to a bar and get arsehole.
Yeah.
There isn't anything up there. So you kept it. You just kept it. You're rowing for. You're only going to row for 2 hours. That's all you're doing. Just the 2 hours. Never mind what's happening after you had to sleep. Forget about it.
Okay.
It's just that set. You're doing one shift at a time. And where I was sleeping underneath the rowers in what is called the cellar deck.
Okay.
And that was half full of water anyway. So you sleep in seawater, but you're passing out because you're so bloody tired anyway.
Yeah.
I passed out. And then someone will shout, it's your shift, and you think, I haven't been asleep yet, but you had.
Right. Wow. What an experience.
I wouldn't recommend too many people do it. It's not fun. There's no way that if anybody tells you it's fun, they're
putting you on. Yeah.
Yeah, they just look for the glory. They're hoping for the glory when you get to the end.
That's right. Yeah, but that's the thing. If you're thinking about getting to the other end, I would imagine that would just drive you nuts because, like you say, you have to do one shift at a time, 1 2 hour, right? Yeah, which is incredible. You know what that reminds me? I've done a few hikes, nothing to this, nothing even close to what you've done. And I find that at a certain point my body it's like doing a marathon. Like I've done a half a marathon. So, there's my body rejected it at first and then it realizes, okay, I'm in for long haul. And then then it clicks and then I can do seemingly for a couple hours at a time. And that's what it is at hiking. First, I'm kind of like a little bit uncomfortable and all that. And then finally my body just acknowledges this is what I'm going to do. And then I'm working together. My mind and my body are working together. So is that sort of the same thing for you? Like, because it is this, man, that some of the things that you've done is just incredible. And it takes such a mental strength and also a physical strength, but to line up the mental and the physical and get that all going at the same time. How easy is that for you? Or is it still a challenge for you to be able to just align what your mind wants you to do versus what your body wants you to do, especially with all this different setbacks, the replacement of your knee and such? How has that shown up for you in your adventures?
Getting older, so it is harder. And that's the reality. I can't accept that I've grown up. But my wife wants to know when I get a proper job, but a bit late for that.
Yeah.
What I turn around the other way. If I've got other people with me, I often suggest to them, stop and take a look around. Just stop for a minute. Don't look at the people's feet in front of you all the time. Lift your head up. Have a look. This might be the only time you can see this side. You might never see this again. Just take your time. Just go. It's only a bit of time. We're going up there. Have a coffee at the next thing or a drink or something.
Yeah.
On the way.
Yeah.
Just chill. Just keep it easy. It's not a race.
Yes.
When you start racing, I remember running one of my first marathon. I got behind rather a pretty girl, and I thought she's much faster than me. I thought, what am I doing trying to prove it? Forget it. Just do your own race, Roger. Yeah. I ended up doing some pretty good times, but just keep it within yourself.
Yeah.
You start looking at that finishing line, unless you're a top athlete, even those boys are checking the miles and they're looking at, if you watch them, they're looking at their watches. Okay. They're timing themselves. They're saying, right, I'm going to hit the 15K mark at this rate.
Yeah.
20K mark at that rate. So they're looking at it. So
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
just take your time.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's really great advice. That resonates with me right now a lot.
It's what I was taught in the fellowship. Just
Yeah,
keep it simple.
keep it simple. Yeah.
Keep it back. Just
Yeah.
you don't have to do everything at once.
Yes. I love
Like,
that. Yeah.
don't worry about things. I mean, worrying is not going to fix anything.
That's true. Just makes you feel more urgent of this pressure to do, to get to the other side of something, right? I love hearing this. This is exactly what I needed to hear. This really lines up with what's going on in my life right now. So I appreciate the advice. So thank you. I wanted to say we will get to your book, trust me. The last question I have about your stories that you've already told us today, Roger, the one about the North Pole specifically, because that seems like such a jump from anything that you had done. Like you said, you trained for some running and such, but to go up and do that hike that such few people have done, that's a massive jump for you to do. And you admitted that you didn't necessarily know what you're getting yourself into, which is probably good. But what kind of mindset did you have when you were up there? Did you feel overwhelmed, like, oh, I've gotten in over my head here, or I should have researched this more? Or was it just that same mentality you just talked about? Okay, one step at a time, I'll get there eventually, right? Like how was that? Because that just seems like such a, marathon's one thing, and don't get me wrong, that's still a huge accomplishment. But then to do 650-kilometer hike in the North Pole is insanely, like inspiring. How was that for you?
The first part is where we got off the plane. I'd never been in minus 28 degrees. And they told me it was warm. That was a warm day.
Yeah.
To get a breath in was just, it burnt.
Yeah.
That's how it felt when I first started. Then they said the first day, we'll just walk up this hill, this little slope here, and get used to it a little bit. So I put on far too many clothes. You put your jumpsuit, winter suit on because it's like a windsuit. Then I put a fleece, and then I put a big coat on, and I'm walking up, and it's far too much.
Mm.
So you learn to balance yourself out a little bit, and you've got so many things you're thinking about because up there. There's no such thing as snow. It's ice. Everything's ice. There's no snow. There's a little bit of the grainy stuff.
Yeah.
It's not the same. It's not soft. It's hard, and it's all, and it's not flat. It's sea ice. So you're always looking at things and watching your feet. Most guys went off with skis. I spent so much time falling off them. I went with James. He took the skis off me and said, "I walk." So I walked all the way. I did not ski because I was even at 61, my balance wasn't great anymore. I'd done something, but you saw things. It was different. It was actually beautiful side of it. I mean, it was hard. When we hit a bad storm, and it went down to, with wind chill factor, minus 79 degrees centigrade.
Ooh.
I mean, that is cold.
Yeah.
And you're wearing merino underwear, long sleeves, and long johns, and a windsuit, a hat, gloves, and boots. But when you stop, as soon as you stop, you've got to put a coat on. You have to think about these things because that's why you lose fingers and noses and all sorts of other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And you get into your tent and you put your temperature in there. It was minus 35 inside our tent one time. The ice was falling off the inside. I put photographs in the book with it.
My goodness.
But you treat it. You don't look at, the pole is miles, is days away. It took us 25 days on the ice to get there.
Yeah.
So we're 25 days out on that terrain. That's a long time. I had the big book with me, and I did read it. I looked at it, and I read little stories out of it. And it just gave me, and I thought back about some of my friends. Sometimes you go back and you remember what they were like and what they were talking about, how they reacted in meetings and stuff like that. And it just gave you a little bit more strength. You're looking forward to, you're looking forward to the food when you get in the warm tent. Yeah. Your mates in there, James was doing the cooking. He'd boil up this freeze-dried food, and that tasted delicious.
Of course.
I tried it at home and it's crap, but when you're out there.
Yeah. It's gourmet. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
it's the best stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, this is such inspiring, experiences that you've had. I really, yeah, I want to talk to you about your book now. Certainly it's throughout a lot of these experiences. Yeah, I imagine your brain was going, this could be a book. This is inspiring. What made you finally pull the trigger on writing a book? How did it come about? As far as, did you have somebody help you write it? Yeah, just a little bit about the book, please.
No, I didn't get anybody to help me write it because I didn't know how I was going to write it or what I was going to write in all reality. I've got a computer because I'm just as dyslexic. Writing on paper doesn't work very well for me. I spend too much time working out what I've written.
Right.
So on a computer, I can actually see it, and I know what it's saying. And I'd write it not in sequence. I put it down, and then I had to redo it, and play around with it a little bit, and it brought more out of my past than I'd ever accepted or realised. Really, there's a lot of stuff I had to leave out, for obvious reasons. I did.
Sure.
A friend of mine vetted the book slightly, some of it, and he said, "You can't put him in there." I said, "Why?" He's dead. He said, "But his sons ain't, and they're worse than he was." So yeah, he used to come out of the book, take him out of the book, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You don't put. So you talking in a general way about my past.
I got you. Yeah.
But more specific about the adventures and the people, what you were doing. It just, I didn't. I enjoyed writing. It was cathartic for me, and someone told me, whilst I was writing it, that it's the most pure legacy you can leave. So my wife says my grandchildren will be more interested because the kids, they've seen me. Oh, that's just granddad. He does that sort of stuff. He's nuts. It's all right. But the grandkids may want to find a little bit more about you.
Yeah, sure.
And if you put it down, you can say it can be done. Yeah. I mean, why I've written part of that is that I honestly would love to find a way for people in recovery to have a look at it, or people who want recovery to realise there's more to life than being addicted. And you can do something if you leave the juice alone. If you leave the booze alone, you can live a different life. It really works. I've seen it in other people. Just that my life is a little more extreme than most, whatever.
Yeah. Safe to say most, I would say. You're probably in that top 1%, if not 0.5% or one of a kind, I dare say. So,
well, it's not many, as you say, not many people have walked to North Pole and got a world record and done the Atlantic stuff.
Right. And then to boot, 41 years sober and, defeated cancer and all the rest. So truly, live a life to die for. It's the name of the book. Where can, if folks are interested in finding you or looking this book up and reading the book? Yeah.
Yeah. So forget the Amazon route. If anybody bought the book, no matter where from, if they buy it from my website, I will. It's the same price. It was cheaper, and I will sign it and personalize it and send them out to them, and there's no cost to do them. You'll just be building.
Brilliant.
So you put Roger Davies Adventure in Google, you can find me.
Brilliant. I'll make sure I put it in the show notes as well, and just if anybody is interested, they will definitely reach out to you on your website and go that route.
That route, and I will promise to, and they'll have my details. If anybody wants to talk to me about how to get through recovery or anything like that, or difficulty like that, I'm open.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
People put their hand out to me.
Yeah. And you know what? Let's say we'll wrap it up with that, Roger. What would be, if somebody is to reach out to you, that's perhaps an early sobriety.
Yeah.
What would be advice? One thing that I really liked what you talked about, there's different levels of sobriety. You said different times of in your sobriety, I want to say you're 12 or so, there was like a different lesson to learn. So what would be like your advice to somebody that's like early sobriety, or if you want to talk a little bit more about these levels of sobriety?
Well, the levels of sobriety were my levels. Not everybody is as insane as me. Yeah. Most people got well quicker than I did. I was still connected to villainy in sobriety. I had one foot in one camp, one foot in the other. I wasn't I would talk about spirituality and honesty, and I was still doing stuff, but I wasn't the sharp end anymore. I was doing whatever. I was bad, but just keep it in the day. Talk to people in the fellowship. Go to meetings if you're into that, but just keep it tight. Just the same man will drink again. If you want to stay the same, you sooner or later you'll go back on the piss. You go back to drugs. Go back to whatever is your demon. But if you take your time and you sit back, I've got the hand of AA is always there to help other people. I know that. Yeah, I'm sure you'll put a hand out to someone if they needed help.
Of course, yeah.
I'm more than willing to put my hand out. And it really is, just keep it in the day and you can do amazing things. And when you've done it for a while, you'll see the benefits and you'll reap the benefits. You think, gee, and all it is, I've got to just stay away from that juice. Start enjoying coffee, start enjoying tea, start enjoying going out, doing things. Seeing a show and watching it all the way through.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Final question for you, actually. This is worth mentioning. I love that answer, by the way. What's the importance of adventure? Like, what is it about these adventures that you go on that has been such an expansive experience to your life?
I like not just doing them, but I like to be able to tell people they can do it too. But I am not so different. I am not bigger, special, cleverer, anything, nothing like that. I'm a pretty ordinary guy, actually, if you got to know me. But I've done some extraordinary things. And I've done them because I've been sober. And I've done them because I've asked someone else. I'm not interested in someone's opinion. I had to tell you, you probably cut it out, but opinions like arseholes. We've all got one, no one wants to. I want your experience. Share your experience with me. And I'm willing to come off on my high horse and ask anybody for help if they know what they're talking about.
Very cool.
Advise me. If someone's longer sober than me, I will say, well, how did you do it? Or someone's not as long as me, but they've got through a problem. How did you do that?
Yeah.
Why have I got to invent the wheel? Or am I, as I was, when I was propping at a bar, I knew everything about everything.
Of course.
And if I didn't know, I'd either knock you out or shout you loud or change the subject.
Right. And that's the big change. Sounds like you're very curious, right? You like you say, get off your high horse, put your ego aside, stay curious, stay learning, stay growing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. And adventures are out there, but everybody's got their own mountain. I've said that before.
Yeah. I love
so you haven't got to do the extremes I've done. You can go and do all sorts of things. There's lots of stuff out there we can do. I want to learn paddleboarding, but my balance is rubbish.
Oh, Roger, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm looking forward to reading the book, and we'll have you back on after I read the book, and we'll ask you some more questions.
My pleasure.